Will portrayals of sex in video games always be downright terrible? So if you couldn't already tell from the title of this week's episode, this week we're going to be dealing with some mature content, specifically sex in video games. And as a result, we're going to need to show some things. So do with that information what you will. Just wanted to let you know up front.
Rated M for mature.
This probably goes without saying, but video games do a really bad job at showing sex. I mean, usually you have a young, attractive male with great abs, just like mine, of course, and another young, attractive, scantily clad female with really giant plastic surgery bills. Most of the time, it's so blatant and ridiculous that it pulls you right out of the experience. It'll be all unsubtle, weird glances that immediately turn into a menage a trois after killing Nazis in a game like The Saboteur. It's not like games are incapable of dealing with more adult, mature situations. Spec Ops: The Line, for example, dealt with the moral complexity of war, and Papa Yo told a heartbreaking tale of a son's struggle with his father's alcohol abuse. But while games are no stranger to hyper-sexualized titillation, rare is the game that has anything to actually say about sex, aside from, "You did it, man, good job, bro." So why are games bad at sex? Well, you might say the graphical fidelity isn't quite there yet to really do sex justice. The uncanny valley is still a bit too wide. This is a really fair point, because facial features, for example, are a really important part of reading emotion. In their landmark 1966 study, two researchers named Isaacs and Haggard revealed something called micro-momentary expressions while watching the faces of couples who were engaged in therapy. Our faces often reveal hidden sentiments. That's what makes flirtatious glances both alluring and confusing at the same time. But realism, as it were, isn't always necessary. Comics from Tezuka to Satrapi have dealt with mature themes of sexuality, and in black and white no less. And in Evangelion, there's a deep and complex sexual tension between Shinji and Misato. Or you might counter, video games are marketed to and purchased by teenage boys, so of course they're going to be immature when it comes to sex. I mean, I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, so I know exactly how ridiculous teenage boys' views of sex really are. But according to a recent Twitch survey, 48% of gamers are women, and their collective age is 30. So unless your coworkers are into the exact same sex scenes as your old friends from 9th grade, we still don't have an explanation. So what's the real reason that games struggle so much to represent getting it on?
Mind if I saddle up to this water hole?
Oh, I love it when you talk like that.
Yes!
For most people, sex is more than just a physical act. Yes, there are bodies in motion, but that would fall under the broader umbrella of human sexuality, which would include the physical act, but also the wider array of emotions that come along with it. The funny thing is, games actually shine at representing the physical stuff. Just look at the animations in the new Assassin's Creed or in Metal Gear Solid. The horses, they poop in real time.
And yes, your horse will do this in the game from time to time, but we'll just ignore that and move on.
You can kick a great lob pass to one of your friends in FIFA without even the trace of an intimate relationship, although the post-goal celebrations are pretty romantic. But when it comes to an action like sex, in which a physical act is intertwined with complex emotions, games kind of get tripped up. Game designer Brenda Brathwaite has been right to call out the distinction in her massive survey on sex in games. Sex in video games is often just another mechanic. For instance, having sex in Grand Theft Auto is about as significant as buying a Hawaiian shirt. It's just a thing you can do. In Killer is Dead's Gigolo minigame, you can seduce women simply by giving them gifts at the right moment. If only it were that easy. BioWare games like Mass Effect and Dragon Age are progressive in that they allow you to pursue same-sex romantic relationships. But ultimately, that aspect of the game is about navigating menus until you get to an R-rated cutscene, which you could probably find on YouTube if you wanted to. Link in the description. Not really. The focus on sex as just a mechanical act leads us to some bigger problems. Usually sex in games is presented as a form of conquest. It's a reward, stripped of the deeper aspects of sexuality. Us gamers are usually fed an unrealistic, idealized male fantasy scenario where sex is dangled in front of us like a carrot on a stick. If you kill enough mini-bosses in God of War 3, then Kratos gets to have sex with Aphrodite. If you solve enough puzzles in Leisure Suit Larry, he gets laid. This encourages a sense that the character, who is usually male, is entitled to sex, which simply isn't true. In real life, sex isn't a reward for completing quests. frankly, I don't think sex should be a reward for anything. Most often, it's a complex emotional event between two consenting individuals. It's about love, hate, lust, power, betrayal, guilt, performance anxiety, sexual tension. There's a lot there. For me, that's the real reason why in a lot of games, supposedly steamy sex scenes look like two weird, lifeless robots going at it. In Netflix's dark comedy, Orange is the New Black, lesbian sex isn't just something that happens. According to June Thomas of Slate, it's funny, messy, and heartbreakingly real. These are the exact elements that are missing from sex scenes in games.
Unhooking a bra with button prompts just feels awkward.
However, a few games do buck the trend by adding deeper complexity to sexuality. Whether you thought Far Cry 3's sex scene was appropriate or not, at least it gives you the option of being selfish or virtuous. Atlas's Catherine deals with the emotions surrounding an affair. It presents intimacy as being part of vulnerability and also moral ambiguity. Then there are the visual novels of Christine Love, like Analog: A Hate Story, which deals with women who are sexually estranged from their marriages, and also intense topics like sexual assault. And one of my recent favorites is Nina Freeman's charming How Do You Do It, which is a really amazing little coming-of-age story told through the lens of a girl playing with dolls. These games are great because they approach sex with real-world context. You could put them in the same category as the Oscar-nominated film The Sessions, which tells the story of a man confined to an iron lung determined to lose his virginity. These games remind us that sex is complicated and on occasion very dark, but more importantly, we need more games like them. Are we saying that these games with mindless sex shouldn't be made? Of course not. Games should be able to represent the full range of human sexuality, but understanding and dealing with sex is an important part of every single culture, and how we choose to portray it really matters, even with games.
I don't want things to change between us.
Things won't change. We're professionals.
You'll see me differently.
Just shut up and say it.
Can you sign my copy of your book?
Sure.
So what do you think? Why are games so terrible at sex scenes? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I'll see you next week. Last week, we talked about toxicity in games. Let's see what you had to say. Cody from Unqualified Gamers makes a very interesting point. Specifically, in other sports like football or basketball, if you get really upset, you have a place to channel your anger, specifically physicality. So that could mean running faster or hitting another player harder if you're playing football, or tackling someone in soccer, whatever that might be. And he says that in esports, unfortunately, or playing games online, that the only place that people can go is verbally. Verbalization, that's the only kind of outlet that you have. You can't press the button harder. And I think that that's true, but I think that the question is whether we as a community want to accept certain types of language as being acceptable. I don't think necessarily what I'm saying is that people shouldn't trash talk ever, or shouldn't curse necessarily. But I think specifically, like, what's the language, and ultimately, what's the intent? I mean, it makes sense at a professional level in that everybody's sort of opted into this super hyper competitive environment. The question is whether or not me as a player wants to be subjected to that same kind of environment, a really hyper competitive, ostensibly racist, maybe like homophobic environment, when I just turn on a game of Titanfall. So I do think some things need to change, probably on the hardware side, but also on the community side as well. Satchbag's Goods shares a really kind of depressing story. Satchbag is biracial. I'm also biracial, so I understand your pain. And stop playing games like Counter-Strike because of people using the N-word. I've faced very similar types of experiences. You're not being thin-skinned. The reality is that language has power, regardless of the context and the environment. And what's crazy to me is that in certain types of online games, the way that people talk to each other, you would never find that anywhere else in real life. Look, I ride the subway every morning to work in New York City, and the type of language that people use with each other on online games is so profoundly different from jostling for a space in the New York City subway. Something tells me that we can get a handle on this, but it requires collective action. If we think that this is a problem, so even if you're not black and you hear someone using the N-word, you have a moral responsibility to say something. If you don't, you're effectively co-signing it. So we all need to get involved. I don't think this is just a case of just anyone who's been subjected to that kind of verbal abuse just needs to suck it up and take it. We're all in this together. Crystal Elf blames parents, specifically that there are 12-year-olds playing games like Call of Duty when that's a game that's rated for 15-year-olds. I don't know if anything happens in the development of a video game player between ages 12 and 15, but I do think the point that you make about Arma fostering a particular community of respect, even though people are engaged in the exact same activity, albeit with sniper rifles at really, really long range over a long period of time. I do think that particular communities can develop their own set of moral systems or moral codes, like the commenters here at Game Show tend to be super nice, whereas in other places on YouTube, maybe not so much. So it can happen. Dennis Fluttershy points out a potential technical obstacle to monitoring and potentially banning verbal behavior on the technical side, like at the hardware level with voice recognition for something like NBA 2K14, which is the example that I used in the video. Specifically, Dennis is from Sweden, and there are certain words in Swedish that sound like bad words in English, like the words for edge or the word for tray or box. So I would just say, Dennis, maybe Swedish, I don't know, maybe Swedish shouldn't be so dirty. I'm just kidding. I love Swedish. Alexandria Johnson has opted to remove all kind of social identifiers, so gender, picture, it doesn't use voice chat, etc., which is one way of dealing with the problem, but doesn't really deal with the bigger issue. Also, it means that you can't be you. One of the things that Jeff Lynne, who's the social systems designer at Riot Games, has pointed out is that most players aren't toxic, right? There's a very small percentage, like 10% that are toxic, but a lot of people have a bad day. And I think that's one of the challenges, is that we sometimes think about our individual actions only as individual things. So if you say that one thing one time to someone online, not in terms of the greater context, which is like how particular games overall foster an environment that's not safe for people like Alexandria. That's kind of a bummer. So it only takes one time to scare someone away. So please try and be careful with what you say to each other out there.